Okay, welcome to case study number 1, part 1. To do this case study, first thing you do is go to course content. Go to the case studies folder. You can see I've got case study 1 number here, or number 1 here. I've already opened it. You can click on that. It'll open up in a Word file. Case study number 1, suggested due date, June 15th. Okay, it's on page 85 through 86 of your textbook, and it is case problem number 2, the motion picture industry. I've already scanned this. So if we go in here, you can see here, this is page 85, is what it looks like. Scroll down, case problem number 2, motion picture industry. And they give you some information here on motion picture industry. What we are going to be doing is examining data for 100 films that were released in 2011. We've got opening gross sales, total gross sales, number of theaters, weeks in release. As you scroll down, you can see that we're going to be using this data to use the tabular and graphical methods of descriptive statistics to learn how these variables contribute to the success of a motion picture. Number 1, tabular and graphical summaries for each of the 4 variables, along with a discussion of what each summary tells us about the motion picture industry. I will be using the data set from this particular problem. When I do these in the future, I will not. We'll use a different problem. Then we're going to do a scatter diagram to explore the relationship between total gross sales and opening weekend gross sales, then discuss a scatter diagram to explore the relationship between total gross sales and number of theaters, discuss a scatter diagram to explore the relationship between total gross sales and number of weeks in release, discuss. What we are going to be doing is we're going to use Excel to do the tabular and graphical summaries, to do the scatter diagrams. Then we're going to copy and paste the tables and graphs that we get from Excel into a Word file to write a 2 to 3 page managerial report. So going back to Blackboard, we go here in that case studies folder. This yellow file right here has got the data set. I'm going to open that. I've already done it. And it looks like this. Okay. Now, what we're going to do here, tabular and graphical, how to do this is in your book on pages 90 through 91. We are going to create a frequency distribution and a bar chart. So I'm going to move this up so you can see better what I'm doing here. I've highlighted motion picture, weeks in release. I'm going to delete what I've done before. And we'll go in here to the data file as soon as I get this set up. Now, if you look, I've got motion picture, weeks in, oops, sorry, delete that too. Okay. Opening gross sales highlighted. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here to insert. Whenever you do graphs and files, and we're going to call these pivot tables here in a minute and pivot charts. Whenever you do this, you go to insert. We're inserting a graph into Excel. I go to pivot chart. Scroll that down. I want a pivot chart and a pivot table. The data I've already highlighted. No, I haven't. There we go. Highlight the whole data set. Don't miss a thing. There are 100 items in this file. The Priest is the last movie. Now I'm going to go to pivot chart, pivot chart and pivot table. I've highlighted the data. I want it in a new worksheet. I'm going to hit OK. Over here, pivot chart fields. Move that over just a little bit. You can see here, we've got this table here, or excuse me, these pivot chart fields. First thing we're going to do is motion picture, opening gross sales. Over here, I have a frequency distribution. Each movie, how many millions of dollars it did in opening weekend gross sales. And I've got a nice chart here. Now this chart has already got my axes labeled. Sum of opening gross sales is on the Y. Motion picture is on the X, but I got a title here, total. That doesn't tell me anything. Whenever you make a graph, you have to ensure that this graph can be easily understood by someone who knows little to nothing about what you're talking about. So here, I'm going to title this Opening Gross Sales for 2011 movies. These are all 2011 movies. Now I've got my graph and my table. I'm ready to do it for the next variable. The next thing we're going to do is a little tricky. You can do column A and column C, column A and column D, column A and column E. And it's easier to do it if you just, what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert a blank row here for B. And I'm going to take, we already did opening gross sales. I'm going to do total gross sales. I'm going to copy and I'm going to paste. Okay. Then I'm going to highlight motion picture, total gross sales. I'm going to go all the way to the end of this file. And we're going to do the exact same thing we just did for total gross sales. Pivot chart, and pivot table. Hit OK. Motion picture, total gross sales. We're going to change the title here. I've got my axes labeled. I just need to change the title. And I'm not going to go through all of this, but we're going to go gross sales per 2011 movie. And we're good. Now I open that up in another sheet. So I got sheet 6, sheet 7. I got to remember the order where they are when I come back. Now we're going to go back to data. I'm going to open this up so you can see what's going on here at the bottom. These are the 2 sheets I created. That's the first one. That's the second one. I've done some other work in this spreadsheet. That's why they're labeled 6 and 7. Yours will be labeled 1 and 2. But whenever we want to go back and do something, we got to go back to data. Data is where our information is. So the first thing I'm going to do is delete this row that I created. I'm going to insert another row. And we're going to go to the next column, number of theaters. I'm right-clicking on it. Then I'm hitting copy. Then I'm right-clicking on row B. I'm hitting paste. Then I'm going to highlight motion picture, number of theaters. Go all the way to the end of the file. Priest is the last movie there. And we're going to go to insert. I'm moving this up so you can see. We're going to insert, again to pivot chart and pivot table. Hit OK. Motion picture, number of theaters. Change the title here. Oops, I erased it. I'm not going to mess with that just due to time, but I would put a title up there. That is sheet 8. The last thing I've got to do is weeks in release. I'm going to delete this column. I'm going to insert a blank column. I'm going to copy weeks in release, paste. I'm going to highlight motion picture and weeks in release columns. Go all the way down to the bottom. The Priest is the last movie. And we're going to go back to insert because we want to graph our table. We're going to do pivot chart and pivot table. Hit OK. Motion picture, weeks in release. Change the title. Weeks in release per movie. Make that 2011 movies. And we're done. Okay. That is part A of our assignment here. The next thing we want to do is a scatter diagram. We're going to use a scatter diagram to explore the relationship between total gross sales and opening weekend gross sales. So we'll go back to our data here. Now here I'm going to delete this. Opening gross sales is going to be on our y-axis. Total gross sales, opening gross sales will be on our x-axis. And we're going to use that to try and explain total gross sales. If opening gross sales are high, does that mean total gross sales will be high and vice versa? So what we're going to do here is we're going to highlight opening gross sales, total gross sales. I've got, let's go back here. I'm going to highlight opening gross sales, total gross sales. Scroll down to the bottom of the file, or the data set, excuse me. Okay. And we are going to go to Insert, and we want a scatter plot. We're going to pick a simple scatter plot. Now, when we do this, we've got a problem. My axes aren't labeled. Total gross sales in millions up here per movie. That is on the y-axis. So I've got to insert axes labels. To do that, you stay in the chart. You go up here to Add Chart Element, Axis Titles, Primary Horizontal. Now here on that horizontal axis, I said the first column was opening gross sales in millions. Opening gross sales, sales per opening gross sales per 2011 movie. I need to label my y-axis. That was gross sales. I go back up to Add Chart Element, Axes Titles, Primary Vertical. This is going to be gross sales per film, or gross sales. We'll just type gross sales in there, but you've got to make sure you say per million. We're going to put millions. Okay. We're done here. We got to add the millions here. So we forgot to do that. And that chart is ready to go. I'm going to add a sheet just to keep things neat. It's going to be data sheet number 10. I'm going to cut and paste that chart into number 10. So I have an idea of what I'm doing when I start to write my paper. We're going to go back to data. Now, the third part of our assignment, scatter diagram to explain the relationship between total sales and number of theaters. Go back up here. There's total gross sales. That's going to be on my Y, so I want that to be on the right-hand side of theaters. So what I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to insert a row here. I'm going to copy. I'm going to paste. Then I'm going to highlight number of theaters, total gross sales in millions. Scroll all the way to the bottom. And insert, because I want a chart. I want a scatter plot. There we go. We'll need to put in our axes. Go up to Add Chart Element. Primary horizontal, that is going to be number of theaters. I'm running out of time here. I may not be able to finish this. We'll just put blah, blah, blah. Okay, number of theaters down here. Then we're going to insert a axis title, primary horizontal, and I'm going to put sales here because I'm running out of time. We'll pick up on the next video. Thank you very much. We'll be right back with another video.